you're trying to grow your wealth, then it should be in a productive asset class. So gold and Bitcoin are both great if we're talking about hedges or stores of value long term. But if you're wanting to grow, then owning parts of legitimately productive companies is a really great way to make sure that your value is not tied to the dollar so much as it is tied to the legitimately productive assets behind those companies.
The problem is or gold has existed before dollars ever did. So
Yes,
to try
it
to
does.
tie the value of gold to dollars makes no sense.
Right. Which I would generally agree. So, but if you're going to have a store of value, certainly cash is trash. That's going to devalue at minimum 3%, probably closer to like 9 to 27. So if you're going to put your money somewhere, owning a thing that makes you more money, even if that money is dollars, as long as you make more dollars than the dollars are devalued, you end up with a bigger pile of fiat nothingness that you can trade for actual goods and services.
Yeah, but Josiah, what happens when we get '08, and if the classic all correlations go to 1, which means there is no asset that rises, and so I've quote unquote put my money to work,
Right.
and nothing works, that's what '08 was.
Housing market?
or housing.
bubble.
Look at the Great Depression.
Right.
We're talking all assets down 90%, except for a handful, and one of that handful was gold mining companies.
Yeah.
Right. So all I would argue back to you is, to anybody in the room, anybody I talk to, I'm not saying light your hair on fire, sell every asset that you have, buy only Bitcoin and gold,
Right.
and run to the hill over there in
Well
Moscow.
diversified is
I'm
is the way to
saying
go.
take what has been over time. What's the number? What's the blue suit off the rack for a guy like yourself to say, look, I want workable assets. We want da da da. But before we do that, like if I'm going to build a home, I've got to lay the foundation first.
Right.
What's the foundation? The foundation is core capital that I'm not going to try to grow, but I'm going to have that as the foundation of my
Right.
financial house. That is gold and Bitcoin.
Yes,
And
and I
then
would
you
actually
go to
agree.
town. You go to town with the other
Yeah,
whatever
so
the percentage
A
is.
solid like minimum 10% hedge is wise. We see the pearl of great price, the treasure buried in the field. Apparently, it was not uncommon practice to take a large store of value and bury it when, again, that store of value was not something that deflates or inflates, right? You can't change the gold, the silver, the pearl. And so when you came back after the thief has come or destroyed, or the nation has come and conquered your territory, you can dig it back up and start from not from scratch, right? You can actually rebuild. So there is definitely a time and a place for that store, for that hedge. But if you're trying to be productive and take the Dominion mandate seriously, which I'm not saying you guys don't,
Right.
Because you're not suggesting that we invest 100% in
No.
your asset classes either.
No.
But that the asset class that you do have as a hedge should actually function as a hedge. And then when you do move that money into more productive asset classes, that they should be legitimately productive based on biblical principles, not, active management as if that's something productive, which the U.S. tries to pretend it is.
Right.
Yeah, and again, a lot of these things, there's a time for everything under the sun. Okay, there's a time to live, there's a time to die. So even if you just examine that, there's a time to do the thing that under other circumstances would be the exact opposite of what you ought to do. Right, like you have Proverbs 26:4-5. Imagine you're sitting here, you're like, man, I've got this fool I work with. Like, how should I answer this fool? And you read Proverbs 26:4, and it's like, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. And you're thinking, praise God, I have wisdom from on high. You
got
go to
the
close
answer.
your Bible, and you read the very next verse, which says, don't answer a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself. And you think to yourself, wait a second, this seems to be completely contradictory. And so it's like the very thing that would connotate faithfulness in one situation is unfaithfulness in the other. And so again, none of us are saying that you shouldn't you shouldn't invest in productive businesses, or that you shouldn't own gold, or you shouldn't own Bitcoin. We're saying, hey, there's a time, like you have to be a man of Issachar, to quote one of your own prophets. You ought to be a man of Issachar who figures out what is going on. Like what are the specific threats and pressures, and what are things to invest in given those constraints in order to be a wise steward.
Just go ahead. I want to hear your response to that. Do you have, unless you don't have one?
Good.
Okay. Okay. So then the question, the real debate is about what time is it, right? Is that where everything really is? Like, so
Yes.
And it's a different time for every person. which is why I don't like blanket advice. The man who has capital to deploy, who has assets that are tied up in fiat nonsense, should probably have a hedge, a large one. And for the one who's barely getting by, I don't think putting a sizable portion of his already stretched assets into a theoretical first principles sort of product, that's the wrong word, currency, money, store of value, is probably going to be a good idea. If he's barely putting food on the table, I don't think he needs to worry about how's Bitcoin doing right now? How's gold doing right now? I think he just needs to focus on putting food on his table, and the way he happens to be able to do that right now is with dollars.
And I think there's wisdom in that. But the problem is there's a massive blind spot that I'm sympathetic to, but you're talking from like an American standpoint, okay? There are billions of people around the world whose national currencies are way more volatile than Bitcoin.
Right, but I deal with Americans.
That's fine. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm not saying you're totally wrong. What I'm saying is, look, what the problem is, there's a massive global market for a monetary unit that is less volatile than their local currency, and Bitcoin is that for many people. And again, gold definitely is that. So what we're not saying, again, we're not enemies here. We're basically saying there are time constraints. There's situations in which you do that. There's situations in which you do this, and there's situations in which you go with Bitcoin. So again, the question is just figuring out like what are my specific constraints. And what are the threat models that I'm most aware of or that are most germane to my situation? I had the privilege to interview Pastor Wilson about a year and a half ago, and one of the things that I said to him, I was like, I've been thinking about Moscow and you guys in relation to Bitcoin for years. And I said to them, like, we live in a world in which you could say something insane like you can't lop off a little boy's penis to make him a girl, and that can get you debanked from your bank. And so I said to him, hey, if you were to be debanked from your bank tomorrow, how would you pay your staff? How would you send money to your missionaries? All these kind of things. And so again, I'm not saying you put all of your money into Bitcoin for this, but there's uses and value propositions for Bitcoin that have nothing to do with trying to get rich quickly. Like this is a real world threat in the world we live in, and Bitcoin is valuable in situations like that. So.
And as a stopgap, there's a Baptist credit union in Southern California.
Correct. Right. And so again,
right.
It's yes, absolutely. Again, we're not enemies here. I'm just saying that great. Hopefully that works. There's a guy named Gavin Newsom in California who's not not very friendly to things like this.
There's a Methodist credit union in South Dakota.
Yes, and so again, I don't disagree with any of this. You just named two things.
But
Methodist.
That's the problem.
He's a Catholic, so.
You just named two things
no
in a country of 380 million people.
Yet.
So wait, are you making an argument though that if we were to engage where we were currently at, we probably wouldn't have to use Bitcoin? Are you making that argument?
I'm not sure.
Well, because he's making a point that listen, there's potential turmoil in people's purchasing abilities, right, to do something with. And you're making the argument that, well, there's other places outside of Bitcoin to go and give your energy to be able to make purchases. Is that what I'm understanding?
Of sorts, only because Bitcoin isn't as widely adopted as the dollar. So if and when it is the widely adopted currency and you can use it just as easily as dollars, it's a superior medium of exchange and could certainly be a superior store of value. My concern is that it is not now. So from a more pragmatic, more Catholic and evangelical point of view, that most people need to deal with the medium of exchange that is the lingua franca of finance right now, which happens to be the dollar, with hefty room for hedging against the dollar with assets that are not the dollar.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Let's take your example of the small Christian client of yours. He's got $50,000 in net worth. If I'm following you, you're saying let's put $5,000 of that, maybe 2,500 in Bitcoin, 2,500 in gold or silver, and the rest of it that you would invest, right?
Potentially, because for most of our clients, it's at least at the moment better to use the dollar as the unit of accounting, just for pragmatic purposes. So if we were to, hypothetically, since I'm not actually currently attempting to get anyone to buy securities, if they were to put their money into a Bitcoin, gold, or silver tracked ETF that follows the value of that asset class perfectly, then it's still denominated in dollars. They can still pull it out. It's still a relatively liquidatable asset. and they don't have to change up and add another burdensome mathematical equation to their asset classes.
Yeah, but in that case, you gave them a financial contract. You did not give them. You gave them something that tracked it.
Right.
And that's great as long as we're not in any sort of a tail risk situation.
What are we, Baptists,
And
terrified
the-
that
and-
the system's going to fail?
Oh no,
This
got real up in this joint.
I'm a pragmatic Presbyterian.
Yeah, I'm the only Baptist here. So,
We'll drown you later.
yeah, we're not retreatists. So we want to reform and refine the systems in place. Which, again, if the U.S. dollar eventually became backed by gold or backed by Bitcoin, that solves our primary issue. The
Correct.
first principles are solved, and we didn't have to change our unit of accounting.
Yeah,
Right,
here-
but that is where we are right now. In that you gotta have. the
But
gold
you still got to
Bitcoin
work in
account.
that world.
You do.
Yeah.
I mean,
not
that's
saying-
where we are. It's like that's where we are.
Right, but I'm saying an ETF is not the same thing as owning Bitcoin or gold outright.
Functionally, very, very, really not.
Yeah.
But for the sake of just hedging, just making sure that your current unit of accounting does not devalue to the point of unusability. It tracks those things perfectly and can, hopefully, mitigate the switching cost when we do move to a different system of currency.
Yeah, here's the issue. All of us understand that we have to operate on multiple time horizons. Like all of us have to live in the world today and pay our bills and do all kinds of stuff today. And yet all of us also have to live to a certain degree, as much as it's helpful, like thinking about the future and planning for the future underneath the sovereignty of God. And so one of the things that when I talk to people, I find is the biggest misunderstanding about money. For a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of people even today, where they're like, hey, when will Bitcoin grow up? When will Bitcoin be mature, okay, to the point that it'll have all three of these characteristics of money that Jim talked about? It'll be a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value. And so one of the most helpful frameworks that I use when I talk to people to try to help them get this point is thinking about children, okay? So here's the deal. If you never deal with the volatility of children, you'll never receive the benefit that adults give you. When you have children, you price in the volatility to your time and to their behavior for having children. Okay, and so your life looks different when you have children than when it looks like when you have teenagers and when it looks like you have old men or whatever it is. So if I were to ask you, do babies bear the image of God? You'd say yes. Now, if I asked you, do 25-year-old men bear the image of God in a more true sense or in a different, greater way than babies do? You'd go, well, yeah, because like older men can work to provide for families and work to provide for other people. And then if I said to you, is a 60-year-old man, does he bear the image of God? Maybe even if this isn't the best way to phrase this, like, does he bear the image of God in an even truer sense because he's got the wisdom of age and all these kind of things? You'd say, well, yeah. And so right now, like, Bitcoin is functionally a teenager. It's 16 years old. And so obviously 16-year-olds are a little bit more volatile than old men under most circumstances. But if you don't adopt babies or young people, you'll never get who they turn into. And there's benefits that young people and that babies have that older guys don't have. And so all I'm trying to say is you shouldn't be trying to wait for this perfect moment in the future, because that's not how God has designed the normal world to work. Right. God has ways and he has means, and Bitcoin is just one representation of that.
Right. And if, to strengthen your point, if you were to invest in your children when they're not worth much and they suddenly become worth $400,000 a piece, your early on minor investment is going to, quote unquote, pay dividends for a long, long time. So it'd be wise to, if you think something's going to go to the moon, maybe hitch part of your net worth to it in order to ride that wave up.
And then the flip side of it, when they're being bad teenagers, right? Then you've got to have something that
Ties you to the
responds to chaos, and that's what gold does. If you look at every time the gold's had a major league rise, I'll give you one data point. When the planes hit the towers on September 11, 2011, gold was trading at $275 an ounce. Today it's $3,400. What have we had for 24 years? It's chaos. It's the United States. What is it? Are we off the rails? Are we on them? Are we leading? Are we it is reflected in the gold price. Let me go quickly back to the example I wanted to ask you about, the individual. So think of that individual, but now think of the individual as a collective of all the people that are members of Christ Church Moscow, or pick your church wherever. My biggest fear, and I think it's yours too, is that our brothers and the brothers that are elders in churches do not understand what's going to happen. Right now, everything's great. We got Christians on our side for the most part that are in Washington that are trying to get the thing fixed. The problem is what happens when Saruman takes it over again and the orcs are running the show again. And this time when and we have another financial crisis. First Presbyterian of Omaha has faithful little guys, quote unquote. They've been giving their tithes for 25 years. They've built up a $20 million building fund. We're about to break ground. Financial crisis. Oh my gosh, it's written into the Dodd-Frank law in Title II that if we go into that again, we're not going to burden the taxpayers. No, what are we going to do? We're going to bail in the deposits of the high net worth guys. Guess who's going to be a high net worth guy? A church that thinks their elder board is going, we're going to be conservative. We're just going to buy 6-month CDs. I'm like, guys, that is not conservative. You are exposed yourself to a corrupt system that doesn't like us. They like us okay right now, but the minute the wrong guys get into the controls, and again, I'm just saying, be wise as a serpent, innocent as a dove. I'm not saying turn every penny of a church's treasury into gold. I'm saying,
but you like that.
No, I wouldn't, because then they'd be offsides the other way.
You got you.
I'm just saying, don't be foolish and think that everything's going to be okay and we'll sail through. You won't.
You're saying though, if a church has a large amount of money,
yes,
that they
building
want to
fund.
protect,
Correct.
That's where you need to put it in some kind of place where it is safe.
Bitcoin, gold.
Right, but churches don't have a lot of money; they have a lot of debt.
Unless
Well, actually, you're the Episcopalian. Your churches have a lot of money. The Baptist world, we have a lot of debt.
I love it. But seriously, when you hit the $250,000 mark, anything over that in church coffers has to be protected in some form or fashion.